Hello, and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly and hopefully lively look at all matters property, designed to be of interest to anyone who has an interest in property. And Property Matters, of course, is sponsored by Town and Country Property Auctions London and Fairview International. There's always plenty to discuss, as always, on anything to do with property, and we welcome your comments, of course, on the video as we broadcast it live, or, of course, via email, propertymatterstv@gmail.com. And don't forget, of course, to also like the page and subscribe to the channel, whichever one you're watching, so that way you get notifications of new videos as and when they're posted. Joining us, as always, is our property expert, Joe Joshi. Happy Easter to you, Joe.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you. Very, very happy Easter. It's an amazingly long weekend. To be perfectly honest with you, I'd almost forgotten that we had a long bank holiday until and also the clocks went forward. I'd also forgotten that. I think this journey that we've had with pandemic, when one day tends to roll into another. As sort of make you not aware of where the things stop and start. There was a time when you sort of look forward to the long weekend and have preparation, but I think it just became another day, albeit a good another day, because obviously it's nice to know that in the world stage we are ahead of the game, that's the excellent news. Was it over 30 million people have had their vaccination and going strong. So, and that sort of step in their feet for the spring period seems to be there. People are certainly more positive, and of course, property is always at the centre of it, as you know. In my mind, there is nothing better than to have property right in the heart of everyone's minds and thoughts, and of course it is where they say heart is where the home is, so that's good news for us.
And of course this is the best time of the year for any estate agent. This is the golden time, isn't it? Because everybody's coming out of hibernation suddenly, and especially now with people looking for more space and a change of environment after the year that we've had pretty much all of it in lockdown. So now people are thinking, right, I really need to make that move, and we're seeing evidence, as we'll look at shortly, that whilst we were saying last week there's been a shortage of stock coming to the market, there's every optimism that people are saying, right, kids have gone back, weather's starting to improve, vaccinations are happening, I'm happy to have people come to my house.
And the longer days, it's quite surprising how much of a difference that actually makes, because when you've got the winter period and the darker days, you almost feel you are going into hibernation and you don't particularly want people coming in, or equally you don't want to it's cozy, isn't it? You want to have it's cold, you don't want somebody coming in there, but all of a sudden that extra hour turnaround, but the fact that the days are longer gives people the opportunity not just to go out and perhaps view, even if they can't view internally, they're going out and doing a tour of the area, getting to know the area, taking a walk. I mean, everybody's back on the walk. I remember last year when the pandemic was announced, we were all on the Fitbit, out trying to catch up our steps and doing all the bits that people tend to want to do in order to, and it kind of almost is a revisit of that. You can see it, but certainly I noticed that when the days are longer, it gives people just that much more enthusiasm, a bit more encouragement to say, okay, let me go and have a look at the area that I've been thinking about. And so, yeah, I think all in all, there is that positivity that is beginning to sort of come into people's mind, and long may it continue.
Absolutely, and that's borne out in our news items this week. It's been an interesting week for news, of course. No stopping the sellers now, Joe. The race for space continues, but the prices did slow in February. And of course, this is obviously a hangover from the fact that people thought, well, there's no point now because the the stamp duty holiday finishes at the end of March. So people weren't flocking like they were in November, of course. But it only meant that the house prices fell by 0.2%. So that meant growth slowed to a whopping 6.9%, which is still phenomenal, isn't it?
Well, if people had that kind of growth in their bank accounts, there wouldn't be any quibbles, would they? So, continues to say that property is the best form of investment that you're ever going to make. And here it is proven, irrespective of where we are in our life cycle and whatever the world throws at us, be it the pandemic, be it the dreaded word Brexit as it was, and anything else. We are in the United Kingdom always sure that property is where we want to be. That's what people want. That's what they invest in. That's what they build their homes on. And here is a point where the yo-yos are created by people saying, look, it's the market and the time of the year and so forth. But everybody else is still on a lockdown, and we are not. We are coming out. We're at the other end. There's so many dates. I've gone past so many pubs, Paul, recently, where they are almost got a podium at the front entrance to book them for the outside space, which apparently is being well taken ahead of time. Everybody's reserved their seat for that moment. I think it's the 12th, when the world will be, I think, rain or shine, they will be out.
The glorious 12th.
The glorious 12th will be the day of reckoning. And so I think, with that in mind, I don't think we're going to be going anywhere this year. That's where I was trying to get to. The point is, I don't think we're going to go anywhere because, when you think that only this week, France has turned around and have now been on a lockdown for the next, 4 or 5 weeks, I think, and apparently Spain and the others are going to follow suit. The Britons are going to be at home. Staycation, as is now the new buzzword, is going to be staycation. And recently I was talking to somebody who said that the hotel room bookings had gone crazy just because of the summer holidays, that people will stay locally. And so all of that is positive news for the people in the country, but it's equally positive news for the property market, because people will continue to rethink and restructure their plans.
Yeah, so we're not going to get that dip in July and August historically when everybody goes away, what they used to call the factory fortnight back in the day. That's not going to happen this year. So the hope is, I think, in the industry is that people are going to focus on their house move, get that done, get it, if there's any opportunity, to benefit from stamp duty holiday until the end of September. Get that will focus minds and keep the market buoyant for another 6 months. So let's hope. But this is the information from Nationwide House Price Index. They're saying that the first quarter of the year, house prices grew 6.9% over this 3 months. But interestingly, Joe, as we've reported previously, in the Northwest, those prices 8.2% over 3 months. And that's the strongest growth on average prices in the North, up to 182 now, the average price. It's the strongest growth for 6 years. So it's definitely a time to be looking further afield, I would have thought.
Yes, and we've covered that a number of times now in our program, week in, week out, stating that people's plans and the way they think have actually now really changed. And obviously the pandemic has made that change. The way we work, the way we think, the way we structure our lives has all changed, and it's allowed people to think further afield. You're getting more value for money. You're getting more property for money a little bit further out. So, yeah, I mean, accessibility. And obviously with that in mind, theoretically, there should be lesser cars on the roads to be able to cover that. But the main roads are getting busier and busier as we see, and you certainly notice it on the school runs in the morning now when the kids have gone back to school. Having said that, they were only back to school for a short time, and then
they're home again.
They're home again. I don't know when they actually go to school. I mean, I often ask that question, because every time I turn around, they're sitting at home thinking, we've got another holiday. That's fantastic life for the kids, but not so fantastic for the adults.
And the other top tip is because London had such a tough year price-wise last year, people wanting to look to move out, prices have been deflated. So in addition to the excitement in the market that there is in the northwest, London's getting a little bit of focus now. Agents in the centre, city centre, talking about the fact that now there are no discounts anymore. People are getting above the asking price because they realise that because the prices haven't rocketed in London, because people aren't buying, they're selling. There's a bargain to be had.
You know, Paul, in the 40 odd years, if I had a penny for every person that said to me, I'm waiting for house prices to drop, there is going to be a crash and I'm ready to pick up my bargain of the century from that, then I probably wouldn't be sitting here trying to talk to people and trying to encourage them to buy. I'd probably be sitting in Barbados somewhere on an exotic island and not thinking about it. The point I'm trying to make there is that it is simply the best investment they're going to get. And London has just gone through that. The reason I went through that, and it goes through that every so often, while some people put it down as a price drop, I put it down as a correction. And the reason why it's a correction, because it's always about supply and demand. And when the international market is here in London, the demand is high. They're here, they're going to buy, they're going to invest. They're going to invest for, their children or their bolt hole in Mayfair or whatever it's going to be. They've been shopping at Harrods, they want to buy around the corner of Harrods, prices go up. And when the pandemic came in, obviously it meant for the last year, people haven't been traveling. So international market has dried out. And though, you have virtual viewings today, people can do that. There is absolutely no substitute for you to stand in that living room or stand outside the front door and feel whether this is the home that you want to be in. There is a feeling that comes with that visit. And you can't get that from any virtual situation, no matter how many you try. It's the same as, it's probably a really silly analogy, but you could go to a menswear store, or a lady could go to a ladies' wear store, and you could pick up two items which are the same size, yet one feels better on than the other. And the reason for it is that it's either in the cut or it's how you feel that one is better than the other. They're on the same rack, they've got the same size on them, the same price, same thing, but one seems to fit better than the other. It feels more comfortable. And I put the same analogy with a home. You walk in and you just know that this is home for me. Or you're trying to then force the issue and say, this could be a home to me if I made this alteration and if I made that alteration. But I know that in the years that I've done that those people that have walked into a place that they're thinking about a home, within the first 10 seconds, they can wear it. It just wraps around them. It feels snug. It feels like this is where I can say is my home. And that's something that you can never take away. So the international market has been away, and the house prices in London have gone for a correction where the demand has dropped. But that's coming, and it's coming back fast and furious.
What's interesting, Joe, is that there is a first-time buyers in general are not being put off by the economic uncertainty. There's still a lot of things that could happen. Furloughs coming to an end. Mortgage relief is will ultimately come to an end. Payments that have been suspended in whatever form will come back again. And there will be inevitably more job losses, but it doesn't seem to be affecting people. They just seem to be gung-ho about this, to the point that actually the irony is now that those first-time buyers who were hoping to save $15,000 on their stamp duty potentially, or up to $15,000, that's been eradicated by all the increases in prices.
And there rests my case, really, in terms of, no matter what the government's offer to continue to motivate the housing market, we as individuals also continue to motivate the housing markets, because our wish and want and achievement is within that, and people say, and one of my sayings is that people gauge their wealth by the value of their home. They feel that basically if the home is doing well, the house prices are doing well, then they're doing well. And it's a good feel-good factor that comes into it. And so irrespective of stamp duty or other things, when they realize that the value of their home has gone up, then almost those become secondary. Yes, it's nice to get the discount. It's nice to have the benefit of the stamp duty discount. But in the bigger picture, am I losing the opportunity to buy something that's going to go up in price? And I'm going to, lose in the long-term capital gain that would be. So if I might buy it today at, £180,000 for argument's sake, will I sell that in 2 years' time at £280,000? And will it go up by £100,000 because that's the demand? So in that picture, in that point, £15,000 is actually small fry in getting the discount. But it is a step, and every step is important for everyone to get on the run of that ladder. And first-time buyers are key to the housing market. They always have been. It's the way their system works. Our system is based on a tier system, Paul. People climb that tier system step by step. Some can actually climb it and take a few sort of bigger leaps, and some have to go through the process. And the process is always that you start maybe with a studio or a 1-bedroom, increase yourself to a 2-bedroom, ultimately move out to maybe a 2-bed terraced or an end terrace house, to a semi-detached, to a detached, and then a bigger detached, and hopefully a country estate. And so that's what, but that's been designed in such a way that people, strive to achieve those goals. They're the targets. I want that. I want to get to that. And this is how that system works. And with that system comes the growth of the value of property and the wealth that it creates. Not that it actually makes you feel wealthy, you've got lots of money in your bank account. What it does make you feel is that it was a feel-good factor. The value is in the feel-good factor, that I did this right at the time, and here I am, it's now worth X, which is why I always say that people gauge their wealth by the value of their home, because if the house prices are doing okay, then they feel they're doing okay. But also on the back of that, what else is doing okay, Paul, is all of the industries that are related to the home. So 9 times out of 10, a new car will end up on the forecourt or on the driveway, because that'll be the next step. They'll think, okay, well, I've got a new home, I'd like to buy a new car. Or they'll go to get the furniture done. I'm going to have all the wardrobes fitted in the house. I'm going to have a new kitchen, a new bathroom, new carpets, new windows, etc. So every other industry starts to benefit from the fact everybody has this feel-good factor.
Yes, it is. It is surprising. Well, it's. I suppose it's obvious when you think about it, but it is amazing just how far that wealth spreads out in the end. Next story is 1 in 9 houses sold for more than the asking price in February. This is the highest share since August 2020. So 11% of the share of properties achieving more than their listed price, the highest share in the month of February for 5 years, according to the estate agency trade body. That's good news.
It's excellent news for obviously agents, as well as it is for the home owners that are now getting that. Okay, there's a little bit of a unfortunate for the home buyers, because they're now sort of thinking, well, actually, we're having to pay more. But what they should really take heed from is that, once you own it, you too, on the next cycle, will be the person that will benefit from its uplift and growth as time goes on. You've got to be in it to win it. It's no good saying the guy won the lottery, but you didn't actually put your money in to buy your own ticket. So this is, in a way, the same scenario. You've got to buy your property, get on that ladder, take the investment, take the gamble, bother your mum and dad and say, look, I want to buy this, and take the share of what could be yours. And that's what it is. And that's what Boris Johnson has said. He wants to create a generation of home owners as opposed to home renters, because obviously it's clear that those that own a home will spend and invest in their home in a much, much different way than those will that when they're in their rented properties. It beggars belief, really, Paul, when I sometimes listen to some of the tenants that might have just said, actually, my bulb doesn't work in the living room. I mean, for God's sake, go and buy a bulb. But because they're renting it, all of a sudden they've got to make a complaint to the lender, to the landlord, to say the bulb doesn't work. Now, if that was your own home, you wouldn't be actually phoning up the mortgage company and saying, excuse me, I've got a mortgage with you, but by the way, my bulb doesn't work. It's amazing. So a home ownership is an amazing I don't know, mindset. It really makes people think about. It's like the old story, isn't it? If you don't put your hand in your pocket, you really don't value what you're about to buy. If someone's done it, then you just got to say, okay, well, that was done. That's all right. But when you do it yourself, all of a sudden you realize that this is mine, and that's the feeling good factor that property does for you.
Interesting that in the month of February, a quarter of all those properties were sold to first-time buyers. That's up 3%. And I guess that's only going to go higher as now the stamp duty holiday has been extended. More people will get involved. But that's still the highest figure for a number of years. So 25% of those were to first-time buyers. So the intention of the stamp duty holiday is that it's doing its business, but probably not as fast as people thought.
No, I think the stamp duty has done its business, and they've done really well to extend it to the end of June. But as you said right at the beginning, look at the percentage growth in the northern parts and the other parts of the country. You have to bear in mind that stamp duty extension up to £250,000 is till September. And so anyone that buys under £250,000 out of London and sort of the outer skirts of West London, the outer towns, if they're going into anywhere probably north of Watford, as we would say, they're still getting a great opportunity, great benefit. There's no stamp duty to be paid. And the saving that you would be making is equivalent to some of the deposits that you might put on your first-time buyer properties. And of course, as you know, there are more and more banks and building society. I think this week alone, a couple of them, and more of them, are coming back into the frame of doing 95% lending. And so for the first-time buyers or even investors or whichever, going out towards the north is giving them good value for money. And if the 8% has been an increase just this year in the north, can you imagine what that would be in maybe another 6 months' time? And it's here to stay, Paul. The reason why it's here to stay is we're not leaving. We can't go anywhere. We'd like to go on holiday. Everybody's booking their holidays, but no one's going anywhere. So what they're going to do is they're going to look at the investment. And as you said earlier on, yes, furloughs and payment times are going to come to an end. But equally, people have saved a lot in the last year because they haven't been able to go out. So, one hand is washing the other. Yes, that something is going to come to an end. But the other side is you haven't actually spent anything either, or not as much as you would have done. I know for a fact the rounds have been cheaper at my place because when I go to the pub, normally it's cost me, 25, 30 quid for a round of a couple of drinks. And, you do that 3 or 4 times a week, Paul. It starts to hurt. But all of a sudden we haven't done the pub rounds. And I'm sure you would endorse that because I know you like a beer or two yourself.
It's a vicious rumour. Circulated by those not in the know.
But rumours are there. They started for some reason.
No smoke without fire.
Exactly. But the point I'm trying to make is, you must have felt. I speak to.
Oh, absolutely.
I can't believe it. I've actually got money in my pocket because I haven't been out. So that money's been saved, and of course, people have utilised that in places like investment in homes. Just think of it. If you're looking at a £200,000 flat, 5% of £200,000 is £10,000. I mean, people have saved probably, if you saved £100 a week, that's £5,000 a year you've saved. In the last year, you've saved half your deposit for not going to the pub.
Do you think that's, we were talking a moment ago, why are people not afraid of the economic circumstances? Do you think because we've had this extra money in our pockets that we've not been lulled into a false sense of security, and maybe that, we're because we've got the extra money, we're feeling affluent, but actually when we get back to real life and start spending in the pub again or whatever we were doing before, going away for the weekend, then suddenly people have taken on these extra responsibilities and they're going to struggle, especially if interest rates go back up again.
But we've always struggled, even prior to going into the pandemic. And what I'm saying with the pandemic is it's just kind of highlighted how frugal we've been, probably, and not realize it, because you kind of just get into that rhythm, don't you? You think, well, let's go to the pub, we'll do that, we'll go out for a meal. You've done 150 quid, £100 on a meal, or even if you go to your standard sort of Toby Carvery, you're still going to do 30 quid by the time you walked out of there. So it's every little bit that matters. And unfortunately, the leisure industry has suffered beyond belief. I mean, it's just, they are not on their knees. They're actually laid out flat on the floor.
CPR.
On one side, but on the other side, people haven't obviously spent that money, and so that's given them another thing. So what this has done is just probably educated us to think a little bit more carefully about how we're spending. So instead of having every night at the pub like you do, Paul, we'd just maybe do 2 nights at the pub or whatever.
It will be interesting to see, actually, if people's behaviours do go back to the way it was, or whether, in fact, they will take a new view of things. This is going to change tack, and we've talked a lot about property purchases, but let's just talk about the rental side of things, because here's an interesting situation that we find ourselves in. So Labour MP Clive Betts is basically saying to the government, look, we've got all these people in rent arrears for various reasons. It's going to cost, they estimate, between 200 and 300 million to pay that down. And they're saying that if the government intervenes now and helps those people, that will be a lot cheaper than actually trying to support them once they've been evicted. So that's a really interesting 53-page report that's come out, and this is reported in the Property Industry Eye this week. Helping tenants pay their rent arrears is the simplest and most straightforward way to avoid evictions and help landlords receive income. So on one hand, you're sitting there saying, well, hang on a minute, if you can't pay it, why should the state pay? But then if you look at it from the other side, it's going to be a lot cheaper for the state to intervene now than later. It makes some sense, but it's an interesting situation, Joe.
This is a scenario of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't situation, really, Paul. So the government had no choice, because through the pandemic, they had enough issues on their hands to deal with, let alone making people homeless of not paying their rents. The problem is that there has been obviously a pocket full of people who would have taken full advantage of that. They know that that's the government's stance, so they haven't paid for maybe 5, 6 months or 3 months. The landlords have been stung pretty badly on that, because they've had to cover their mortgage payments from their own pockets. And then they've got a tenant sitting in their property who's probably getting the benefit of the furlough maybe, or the benefits support that they're getting from their local council, or whatever route they're making their money, but they're not making that payment. And the law has given them that thing. Now, the irony of it is that they want to have another law that says, well, why don't the government continue to pay for these people who have actually not paid, but they've had the money, and so it is. That's why it says you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't situation. And the problem is that there are obviously genuine cases. I understand that, and I'm there to support and help those that need it. But the problem with this is that there are also not so genuine cases that are actually taking advantage. And it's those that are taking advantage probably that are actually going to cause the issue to landlords, because they have the right to. They can say that this is what's going to happen. I can't leave this country. I can't come back to this country. Some people went away and had to come back from 14 days furlough. 14 days of staying at home for the purpose of the pandemic, or their job was going to be lost. And so, listen, we've been through hell. There's no question in my mind that that's happened. But I'm not sure that the right answer is going to be to actually throw more money at a situation and leave it for longer. And because the minute you give somebody something, it's the old adage, isn't it? You give somebody an inch, they'll take a mile. And then the next thing is, what else are you going to do? So, they've spent a lot of money. I'm not sort of standing there and siding with it. I just think that they've done a good job. When I look and listen to what the current reports have been this week alone, or with European counterparts, in those circumstances, we've done well, and we're going in the right direction. So, Yes, I hear the report there, and I understand that there are going to be landlords that are suffering. Equally, I'm not sure, in my mind, that it's the government that needs to sort of come out and throw more money at something that they've actually already thrown money at. And people just need to get a little bit real, I suppose.
Let's just put some context on it for a second, because I think this really surprised me. So the ban on the evictions due to the pandemic, which started last March, is going to end at the end of April 31st. Sorry, end of May, 31st of May. Okay, so evictions traditionally since 2015 they've been falling by 8% a year. So 31,000 were evicted in 2019. There's going to be about 28,000 last year. In actual fact, there were 7,500 evictions last year. According to a group called Landlord Action, of which Paul Champlina is that heads that up, he's basically saying there's now a backlog of cases, but it's impossible to say the size of the problem because it's masked by all the furlough payments, the business grants, and the mortgage holidays, as you say. But he thinks that once all this stuff stops, there's going to be an eviction avalanche. And if you think about it, the eviction process is well and truly dealt with within 6 months. Through a court. However, of course, he's seeing that 60% of the cases sent through to him to deal with are 6 months or more. Not all cases go to eviction, of course. Some they come to an arrangement with the landlord. Sometimes they pay the money back. Sometimes they move out of their own accord. But what's interesting is that those cases that were given the go-ahead by the courts to evict last March, just before the pandemic lockdown, those licenses to do that have now, or about to, need to be reapplied for because the duration of that order has come to an end. So they need to be renewed, and there's no understanding yet in the courts as to whether those people that have still got outstanding matters to sort with and need a new license can get in the courts before those that have got 6 months that have come up since last March, if that makes sense. So the whole thing is a huge muddle. But it does feel that the burden of debt, perhaps, for the pandemic has been, in terms of property, has been dumped on the shoulders of landlords. That's certainly their view. What do you say to all of that?
Absolutely. As I said, right at the beginning of our conversation in the earlier part, that, it's the landlord that is absolutely getting a battering on this. In terms of the current circumstance. And Paul Champlina, he is a well-versed person in evictions, and he knows the rules and the laws and how to get around them and to get people out. But what he and any of us didn't bargain for is obviously what the government has had law changes during that period. If you were originally on a short hold tenancy agreement, you were entitled to a 2 months notice. And so from 2 months onwards, you know that you can plan. But now you can't serve a notice currently for 6 months. And from then you start to work. So you can't serve a notice for 6 months. And then you got to serve a notice for 6 months. So theoretically, you've got a year, give or take, unless there are some exceptional circumstances that allows you to evict those people. And in the meantime, the person that is going to suffer all the way to the bank is the landlord. They've got to find the funds to continue to pay their maybe buy-to-let mortgage or subsidize their income that may have come from this investment from somewhere else during that period. But it's going to take the next 2 years, potentially maybe even 3 years, to get up to speed, because everyone that was supposed to have been evicted, they have lost their time span and they've got to reapply to the courts. So that the courts will be the ones that will be inundated over the next, year, 18 months, just to try and get some of that stuff going. Some of it will sail through very quickly, depending on the circumstances. As you rightly say, some people will probably genuinely come along and say, look, I know I've been creating you a bit of a problem, but here's your money and I'm going to stay on. And the others will, not go. But what they don't realize is, while doing that, is they actually create themselves a problem going forward. Because if they've done that, they will not get another place to live. because obviously any new landlord is going to ask what happened to the previous situation, and it's part of the process of their credit check and their circumstances. So people should really think about that. Yes, if they've done this for the last 6 months or not paid the landlord, then either pay the landlord, or there are bigger consequences. It's not just the eviction. There are bigger consequences that will come in part of your credit history, which will not allow you to maybe rent again, let alone potentially go and get a mortgage to buy again. So sometimes it's short-term thinking, but long-term problems. And so my advice would always be to anybody is that talk to them. The secret in this whole thing is a communication thing. And if you talk to your landlord or you talk to your agents that are dealing with it, the chances are you'll all work out a circumstance that will work together. But by not doing it, whilst the landlord is suffering today, the tenant will suffer twice as much in the future. So don't think that you're actually, winning, because it will come and bite you in your backside when you're least looking for it.
Guarantee this coming year is there won't be any redundancies in the court system. There's going to be too much work for everybody. Now, the other week, Joe, you spoke about the fact that there was one item that was the new must-have when you look for your Des Res, and that, of course, was broadband. And whilst that stands true without question, there is another one that we've missed, and it's been reported this week by a law firm called Coffin Mew, who basically saying to all conveyancers, you need to take into consideration when valuing a property the provision or not, as the case may be, of an electric vehicle parking and charging facility, which, when you consider, Joe, that all cars are going to be electric from 2030, that's not a bad shout, really.
Yeah, I'm not 100% convinced with these electric cars yet, Paul. But of course, it's important to take on board that they do need charging, and so either they have to have facilities at a nearby electric station, because we can't call it petrol station anymore, because it wouldn't be petrol or diesel, it would be electric station, where they can park their cars. But how is that going to work? I can't get that in my head, Paul. How many queues are you going to have for people who've got to stick their plug in there for an hour and have a cup of coffee in the coffee whilst their car gets charged up, when at this moment in time you can pull in and pull out of a garage in 15-20 minutes and get your coffee to go, and off you go. And equally, the same issue will come at home, because you've got to literally charge your car. And I've been talking to people and trying to get this in my head and understand it, that locally it's great, and if you're a local surgeon or a doctor or someone who's you can park it because you're in one place forever. But those people that are traveling around the country, I'm not quite taken on the idea of how they're going to charge. I mean, it takes you an hour or so, even on the most dynamic charger, to charge it fully. And then when you get to the destination and you've done your miles, you've got to spend another hour waiting for someone to charge. Now, if people are putting time and money into context, where do you put the price of that time and money? I mean, I know you're going to save the planet and save the earth and so that sort of stuff, but equally, sooner or later, someone's going to come up with that. So yes, charging points just in the street that you live in are going to be important. Charging points at your home are going to be important. Charging points at nearby charging garages is going to be important. And that is all going to change the infrastructure. And so recently, I don't know if you noticed that all of a sudden solar panels and that kind of business is booming again, because now people are thinking, well, if I'm going to have a charging point for my car at home, I may as well have a solar panel and get it all from the sun. But even that is costly before you actually going to start making money. So I'm not sure if this is a money-making scheme at this moment in time. Not trying to put cold water on the subject here, but it just doesn't gel in my head that I'm going to spend an hour here and an hour there waiting for the car to be charged, only to find that an hour later. And then, of course, the cost of those batteries to be replaced is huge.
Yeah.
When it goes wrong, if you happen to have a bump, and the battery's on the front, I've been given some pretty astounding numbers of what it would cost to replace that battery
Mm.
in a car that is already cost probably £100,000. So jury's out in my book for that one at the moment. But yes, I take on your point, and I think yes, those things are going to have to be considered, and within their conveyancing, those things are going to have to be looked at.
I can see yet more front gardens being laid to shingle so that a car can be parked on the front, so that the thing can be put on the wall and left overnight in front of the house. I suspect there's going to be even more front gardens going to rack and ruin.
And that takes the street out, doesn't it? And it's something that I've always said: your presence of the front, and will the car be stuck with those? Will there be wires? I don't know. I'm not convinced. They need to put them around the back in the garage or something. I suppose that's what they've got to try and do, or leave it at the electric station down the road, and then they'll probably find someone's borrowed it overnight and used up the charge that they actually wanted to charge it up, and it's stuck somewhere else. So it's like have you noticed that these little silly scooter bike things that is now just scattered in the town?
Yes.
And every time I go there, I think to myself, what did they do? Run out of charge and they just dumped it? Because they are dumped in the most amazing locations. You would never imagine dumping your bike in some of the places where these scooter things are just left. And
really?
So I asked myself, was it because they ran out of battery, or did they run out of money in the meter of the scooter? What actually happened? Someone's got to go driving around and collect those scooters and put them back in their starters again. So yeah, I think we're all right at the moment, and I'm sure it will come back with that. But I'll tell you something, for nothing, Paul. Broadband is definitely a big key thing. That is an issue, right?
Remember where you heard it first.
Remember where you heard it first.
Almost there with our stories. Chain-free homes for sale as owners move out into short-term rentals. So basically, and this has obviously been driven by people who want to make the deadline on the stamp duty holiday, sellers are being pressured by the buyers to complete within the time frame, and therefore feeling the need to move out, and therefore that puts them in a great position as cash buyers with no chain. I mean, this has gone on for years, obviously, but these figures are rising rapidly. So it's up from 15% a year ago to 21% now. But in London, that's gone up from 12% to 21%. So nearly twice as many people are moving out into rented. And one of the reasons that they're suggesting is because they also get a benefit by moving to a new neighbourhood where they're thinking of buying, renting for a couple of months, being a cash buyer, seeing if they like the area and it suits them and what streets it might be that they would want to be in. And therefore they can move quickly and dynamically. So there's some method in that, but rental demand is up 40% as a result. Who'd have thought it?
Well, behind every cloud, there's a silver lining, isn't there? And when you look at the subject we've covered with people that are actually need to be evicted out of their homes because they haven't been paying rent, then there's another new market that's just turned up that says, I want to sell my house. I don't want to be a burden of completion, so I'll go and rent in a new area, and then actually maybe I like that area, and if I like it, that's where I'm going to buy it, and so forth. So there's always an evolution in this property market of something. People always need to think outside the box and think about how they want to structure. But one of the reasons these things are happening is that this law came in where people were stuck for 6 months. And I've had that where people normally would never have a property empty, but will now rather have it empty and sell than have a tenant in it because they're now stuck for a year before they can actually sell it. So the reason why some of these people are saying, okay, well, look, I'll just move out and I'd rather not rent it, or it's empty and therefore I'll sell it, is because they don't want to be caught up in this long run of the system that says that they are going to be stuck in there for another 12 months before they can actually get around to selling it. And by not doing that, they lose the window of opportunity of buying something in the new place, which they would probably end up paying more for in a year's time, because house prices will continue to go up. But they would have lost because they would have had a person in their property that they couldn't evict. So, you know, it's a case of the balance, really.
There's an interesting twist to the story as well, Joe, because in certain parts of London last year, rents fell by as much as 10%, which has meant that a number of landlords have sold up because there's just not the margin anymore. And the fact that more people need rental properties, landlords have been selling them, and so there's less stock on the market. So that's why demand is up 40%.
And equally, the government's offered a no stamp duty, so it's a great opportunity for the first-time buyers to get in there and not have to that. So, like I said, behind every cloud, there's a silver lining. It's just a case of what works for you and how tactful you are in order to be able to deal with it. But it doesn't take away, it doesn't negate the fact that property is still the best investment there is going to be. One way or another, they'll find a way.
I've got to share this with you. We're running short on time, but I have to share this with you.
I mean, as you would say, really?
The race for space is causing, of course, prices to rise, but this takes it way too far. So this is a 4-bed property on Rightmove on the 9th of March in Aylesbury. It's a terrace property, and interestingly, it was on for 70 million, Joe. And there was no evidence in the write-up or in any of the buyer's pack or anything like that about the fact there might have been a gold mine at the bottom of the garden or that there was any gilt taps in the bathroom. But 70 million, they didn't have any takers for it, interestingly.
Yeah, I heard about that property. I think MI5 actually laid claim to that, because in the bunker of the property, which they obviously didn't tell you about, is where Q had his Aston Martin parked for 007. And they chose this particular one, but someone let the cat out of the bag and said 70 million is the price for it. And of course, they had to change the location. So unfortunately, it was dropped by I think almost 90% in value overnight to actually £700,000. Which is, contrary to the whole of our subject today about house prices doing well and going up. This is the one that has taken the final straw, as they say, and actually dropped in price. So I take it all back. There is always something that falls down in price, and so here we are from 70 million to 700,000. I'm surprised there wasn't a queue outside for everybody who wanted to buy it.
Absolutely. And we are in the season, of course, for April Fooling. Now, let's have a look. Just one quick reminder, because we've still got some interest on Crown Court in Windsor, which is a development that you're looking at the moment. And we're watching the video on screen here now. Just give us a quick update on where we are with Crown Court, Joe.
Well, we had a launch day last week, really, really successful launch day. A lot of people turned. I think a lot of people were quite surprised at the quirkiness that each apartment offers. And we're there every Saturday. And so those that they couldn't make it this week can certainly try and book a time for next week from 11 till 2 o'clock, have a view. We've got 9 unique apartments, already got 4 that are underway. And so there's a few more left. So yeah, if you're looking for an investment or your first home, near Windsor or in Windsor, as they say, it's Dedworth, Windsor, not far from Legoland and not far from Ascot Races, potentially good areas for, I think, Airbnb, to be honest with you. You'd have a field day. Windsor itself is very, very popular. So give us a call. Come and have a look. Anyone want to do that, just give us a call. We'll arrange a time. Of course, with pandemic in mind, appointments have to be made at a distance. Otherwise, I'd, throw wine and cheese there and you can all come along, which would be great, I know. But unfortunately, we can't do that.
Lovely, Joe. As always, thank you. We're out of time, but thank you so much for your contribution. As always, fascinating to talk property with you every week. And we hope it was of interest and enjoyment to everyone watching at home. Thank you very much indeed. Don't forget to like the page or subscribe to the channel, whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube. And of course, we'll see you again for another Property Matters, this time next week.